As a manager with edit rights, in the new user interface and the pay calculation 2-point rules engine, this is how you can access your employees' timesheets. Your home screen will be laid out as you see here with a clock widget, accrual balances, schedule, and if we go to the scroll bar out to the right and scroll down, missing punches, any saved reports that you have, and finally at the bottom, an attendance board. So there are several ways that you can get to an employee timesheet. One is by clicking the pencil to open the timesheet on the attendance board. Another is if the employee happens to be a missing punch report, clicking the pencil to open the timesheet. Or you can open the navigation panel and use the search bar and start to type the first few letters of the employee's name, and the employee will come up, and clicking on the quick links for that employee will allow you the option to see all timesheets or the current timesheet. So any of those ways will get you into the timesheet. This is the new timesheet profile in the new UI. So starting at the top, you'll see the employee's name, and again, access to those quick links. You'll see the calendar. It'll show you the dates that are currently in the pay period that you're viewing. So in this case, June 28th to July 11th. But if you needed to navigate forward or backwards, one period, you could use these forward or back arrows. Or if you needed to jump to some point in the future, you could always go on the calendar, pick a particular month, and select that date to go to the time period that contains that date. On the top right, you have the ability to upload a document if you needed to. You have your Save button. You have your Approve button if you're somebody who approves timesheets. And in your ellipsis, there are more actions. For example, you can view an employee's time off counts. Or if you needed to edit a schedule, you could do so, or you could print the timesheet if you needed to. Tabs across the top are now time entry, adjustments, calc detail counters, and summary. Many of you are accustomed to there being an exceptions tab here. Exceptions will actually occur right in the timesheet now and do not need to be on a separate tab. So to make an entry for a particular day, today's date will have the blue line next to it, and the chevron here is an operator that will open or collapse that particular day. So if I click on this chevron for the day of July 1st, it will close it and I won't be able to make the entry. If I click open, it'll open the entry for me. In the column header, I can actually open and close all of the chevrons in that particular pay period. So if I were to say expand, this would open up, and now you could see if I had to make entries for every day in that particular pay period, all 14 days would show up. If I close the chevron, then all 14 days will show up, and I'll just have the summary data for Friday, July 3rd, which we have auto-populated as a holiday. So let's make an entry for today, July 1st. Clicking on the drop-down arrow, if I wanted to make an entry today, I could say the employee is scheduled to work 7 to 3:30, and we could just say 7, and maybe they're going to work a little late tonight, and we're going to put them out at 4 p.m. When I click the Save button, you're going to see that the out late exception is fired, and in this company, it actually causes the system to round to schedule. So the rules for this company say that the employee is supposed to work their schedule, which you can see on the right side of the screen here, 7 to 3:30, with a half-hour unpaid lunch for an 8-hour day. The system here is rounding this 4 p.m. punch back to their schedule, and if that's the case for your company, you'll see the exception here. So in the past, if you wanted to authorize, you would have to go to a separate tab called Exceptions and pick the out late and say that it was authorized. In this scenario here, if I want to authorize, I simply clear the exception by clicking the X next to it and then clicking the Save button. Now you'll see that the 8.5 hours is calculated, and because this is a Public Works employee, we can go to our Summary by Day tab, and we'll see that over 8 hours in the day automatically is calculating as overtime for that employee. Clicking back on the time entry will take me back to the timesheet. Let's say that the employee came in the evening for a callback. So after hours, they came back at 9 p.m. And they were out, at that callback for 20 minutes. Okay. There's no longer a pay category field for your overrides. So to override a row, you're going to use the shift column now. And then on this second row here, we're going to say that that is a call-in. And clicking on the Save button will give the employee guaranteed hours depending upon your contract. So in this case, I'm guaranteed 3 hours of overtime. Now, if the employee would like to have comp time in lieu of this, you can simply select call-in comp 1.5. Clicking the Save button is immediately going to add that comp time to the employee's time off count. So these 3 hours are now getting multiplied by 1.5. And if we use the ellipsis at the top of the page to view the time off counts for the employee, you're going to see this employee now has 4.5 hours of comp time. If we were to go back to just the regular call-in here and hit Save, it immediately adjusts the bucket, and you're going to see that that comp time bucket is going to go back to 0. So the various operators are in here for a 1.5 comp election or a double time comp election, a call-in comp election, and then any other ones that are pertinent to your company. Okay. To access time on a different day, let's say Monday we wanted to make an entry, we can click the chevron to open up the entry field for Monday. And let's say on this day that the employee is going to work from 7 to 3 and wants to leave early, is going to work through lunch. So they work from 7 a.m. To 3 p.m. And when we click the Save button, the system is automatically deducting the lunch that's in the schedule and paying the employee for 7.5 hours. So to add an exception to the screen, on the row that contains the entry, if you click the ellipsis at the end of the row, you have the option to manage exceptions. So in this case here, we want to add an exception, and it'll bring up a list on a drop-down here, and then we can say that we want to add the don't deduct lunch exception. So when we click OK, you'll see that that shows up, and when we click the Save button now, the system will recalculate and it won't deduct lunch, and so 7 to 3 will have those entries. Should you need to add a note to the system, the note field is right here. And then if you needed to make a change of department or job, depending upon the allocations that are on your timesheet, if this were a department change, I can click on the list, click Browse, and it'll give me a list of all of the departments. So if I needed to change something for a department or a job, I could make that change and then make Save as well. And that's getting around the new UI timesheet. Another useful feature of the PayCalc 2.0 engine is the ability to do adjustments for the entire pay period. So if we click on the Summary by Day tab and look at what this employee has earned so far, we can see they've got 3 hours of a call-in, 8 hours of double time, 4.5 hours of overtime. And the employee looks at their pay week and says, you know what, I'd actually like to take half of my double time as comp and maybe an hour and a half of my overtime as comp. So rather than having to go into each entry and then try to split and make adjustments, we can just go to the Adjustment tab and add a record and pick any day in that particular pay period. So we'll just say July 1st, and we could say that we want to take 4 hours of double time and get rid of it, minus 4. We want to take that as a 2.0 comp election, 4. We want to subtract some overtime, minus 1.5. And we want to take that as a 1.5 comp election for 1.5. So when I click Save, what's happening now is the overtime is getting negated, the double time is getting negated, and then those amounts that were put in as comp elections, 4 is going to be multiplied by 2 to give 8 hours, and 1.5 is going to get multiplied by 1.5, which is going to give you 2.25 hours. So again, if we go to our ellipsis and look at our time off counts, we're going to see those 10.25 hours are immediately in the comp bucket. And then if we go back to our Summary by Day and look at our totals for the week, we're going to see still have the 3-hour call-in, but the double time is reduced to 4 hours, and then the overtime is reduced by an hour and a half down to the 3 hours. So the employee's going to get paid what they needed to, and it was very easily accomplished using the adjustment tab. So you still could, if you wanted to, have done it this way, but you would have had to have gone into each day and then split out, say in this day where the employee worked 20 hours, you would have had to split out 7 to 3:30 and then 3:30 to 7:30 for the 4 hours overtime, and then 7:30 to 3 a.m. For the 8 hours of double time. So rather than have to do all that, it's much easier to just look at what the totals are and then say, okay, for the entire pay period, I earned so much overtime or so much double time. And if I want to take some of that as comp, just come to the adjustment tab, pick any date in that pay period, and say I want to adjust off this much overtime, and I want to add it as a comp election. I want to adjust off this much double time and add it as a comp election. And again, clicking the Save button will accomplish that. And again, another really cool feature of the 2.0 PayCalc engine.